Hey everybody, this is Joel over at importsauce.com, and today we are talking about putting our design gauges into our pre-facelift P1 Volvos. I'm going to warn you, this video is extensive. It is 20 minutes, but we are going to talk about layer by layer here. You're going to be a pro by the time. We're going to tell you how to get your bezel off. We're going to explain how to get your plastic. We're going to explain the difference between the two plastics on the pre-facelift and the facelift R design. We're going to talk about the bezel, how it fits, how it differs on each, how you can get one to work on the other, how to remove it. We're going to talk about the difference with the key sensor, which is on the pre-facelift, which is not present on the later facelift models. We're going to talk about the differences in the filters on the gauge clusters, how they differ, can you make them work, will they fit, are they cross-compatible? We're going to talk about the differences in the bezels around the gauges, the depth, and how they attach on each cluster. Can you make these ones work and retrofit them in? We're going to talk about the actual gauges and how they come, what needs to be done to get these to match these so that they will fit in there. We're going to talk about filters. We're going to talk about the trim. We're going to talk about the LEDs. We are going to talk about the needles, how to get them off, how to upgrade them, how to change the color, how to recalibrate. So again, the video is long, but we are going to break it down for everybody out there with a pre-facelift P1 who wants to get these awesome blue gauges into their dash. Okay, so here is the thing. In a facelift car, 08 and up, you will be able to get the R design and you will be able to plug and play with simply just going to the dealer and getting the mileage reprogrammed. So a lot of times and a lot of cases, what will happen is you're going to plug in the R blue face cluster into your car and the mileage is stored inside the cluster. So what happens is, and what we've seen or heard all over the forums, is that the car is going to take the mileage of the highest cluster. So if your factory cluster or your standard cluster had 100,000 miles, the R design had 150. As soon as you plug it in, your car is now 150,000 miles. So be aware of that. That's why a lot of these listings that you will see online will include the mileage. But here for the transformation for putting the R design into the facelift, things are going to be a little bit different. It is reported that on a 2007, you can plug and play these with the same issue. And that is going to be that you may have a mileage issue. If your car's salvage, if you're keeping it, if you don't care about the mileage, then that's not a big deal. But keep in mind, if you are going to sell it, if you want your Carfax and your service records to line up, then you might want to contact the dealer, talk to them about what it's going to cost to reprogram it as if you bought the cluster from them. I would not recommend doing it and then getting a hold later, because it's going to look shady when you show up and ask them to reset your odometer 50, 60, 100,000 miles backwards, and that may be an issue. So let's take a look and see layer by layer. First, getting your cluster out. Behind the steering wheel is your bezel. If you look there, you have two holes, and that is going to be your famous T25. On the back, there are two push clips on each side. So after you get those out, you're just going to kind of pop this out, get it out from behind the steering wheel, and you are left with your cluster, which will be inside the panel as well. You're going to have another T25 on that side, a T25 on that side. Go ahead and remove that. Set those aside, and now you can get to the wiring. On the pre-facelift, there is, this is your key sensor. So when you click unlock, lock, all that good stuff, this is the actual unit that receives that. It's a green harness there. Pull that off, push it out of the way. And I'm going to talk about that here in a second some more. On the back, down, bottom corner, you have the harness that is going into there. You're going to push down the tab and pull out. And then at that point, you will be able to, what we did is kind of shuffle this over to the driver's side and then pull it out. And then you'll be kind of where we're at here, where we have two clusters, or one cluster, your cluster, sitting on your bench. So as noted before, some people have noted that this can go into an 07 as long as it does not have this receiver on top. It should be noted that this receiver has nothing to do with your cluster. It just so happens that it is mounted there. So if I didn't want this there, I could easily remove the T25s. I can leave it plugged in and just leave that inside of the car. And that's not a problem. If we look at the R design or the newer, we'll notice that Volvo had put that somewhere else. I don't know. Doesn't matter to me, but that is one of the differences on why they say the 07, apparently 07s, they had already rerouted this, so the wiring harness on here will work for a plug and play minus that mileage. Okay, so you have it out, and here's what I want to note right off the bat. In this application, we are simply going to move the blue faces over and probably use the newer needles. I'll explain that when we get to that layer. There are some other things. You'll notice that the rings a little bit thinner. These have that nice depth and arch to them. The bezel that goes around inside is a nice angle. Over here, it's just some flat boring. You could essentially make a lot of these components work over here, but we will talk about that. There is some modifications that will have to be done all the way around. So you want to get to the next layer on, let's remove the plastic glass piece. So on this, you're just going to go around. There's little push tabs on the cluster, the pre-facelift. You'll notice two screws, one there, one's already removed there. So on the R design, those tabs are the same, but it does not have those screws. Again, a different design, which is probably relative to the key receiver there, right? So you remove that, two screws on your guy, and you pull that off. Same thing here, you're just gonna pop those out, pull it off. Here's the first difference we want to note. There are two buttons on the pre-facelift, which is clock and reset and all those cool things. Over on the facelift, we only have one. So the glass has the single, and this one has the double. So that's our first difference that we're noting. Which doesn't make a difference, because if you're putting them in here, you just use the same glass as the double. There's no real visual difference there. Okay, next we are going to get to the rings. On the pre-facelift, the rings are going to pop off, and there are different little plugs, and those plugs will go into place, and that's what kind of holds it. They, if you'll note, they have the notches along the top, which lines up with the readings on the gauge face, and then on the bottom there is nothing. Same thing here. You are going to, this one pulls off. We'll see here it's a little bit different. These are kind of a little bit thicker push clips right there. 3 of those. So we looked at, well, these are really cool. Maybe we're gonna wanna put these into the new face. The lineup holes do not match, and they are different sizes. If we look at the back of this, it's 2 little pins. If we look over here, we see it's those larger clips. So these could definitely work if you shaved or cut those 3 clips off. And then when you would to put it on here, you're gonna wanna line everything up. Same thing, you have your non-notched at the bottom. You'll line up the last one with the top of there. You'll line this one up with 0. You'll make sure everything sits flush, and you may have to just put some super glue and dab that on. When we go back to building this cluster back up, we thought about doing that, but we'll show you why that's not gonna work in a second. Actually, that, you know, it would work. So we may end up doing that. That's gonna be up to you. Okay, so those are the rings out of place. Next, you are going to get to the needles. There is a difference in needles. When we did pull them off, let's go ahead and take a look. Here is a new one. Here is an old one. When you're pulling those off, what we used was a door panel kind of clip remover, and we just kind of put it in, gently pry it up, and that was just sitting there. It's obviously going to be a little harder. Okay, so we have our pre-facelift and our post-facelift. I'm lining up where the needles actually will be centered, and we can see the needle size is exactly the same. So as it spans the gauge, it will be fine. We did notice here that the needle is actually almost on top of that bezel, but it will also work on this one. Here's the difference. The pre-facelift is a circle, and it is kind of a brown color. The post-facelift, if you look closely, it has that blue hue to it. When it's in there, it almost looks black, but it does complement. The shape is more egg with a flat on the end, and that is because, I'll show you on one of the smaller ones here. If you have the bezel or the trim piece in, we'll notice that the egg shape on the smaller one, you see how it kind of raises up, and that is because it actually floats over that. So it needs it for the room on these bezels, but when we put it over here, we don't need that clearance. So these post-facelift needles are going to work. We are currently in the process of doing a write-up on how to convert yours from orange to blue or whatever other color you like. So that's going to be a separate video. Note that the needles will come off in one piece for the most part, but if not, they are made up of 3 separate pieces. You have the housing, you have a needle retainer, and then you have the needle. So all of those kind of snap together, and then that's what it looks like. So if yours comes off in multiple pieces, that's fine. You're going to be able to put it back together. So don't think that you broke anything. Okay, next, let's look at the actual trim bezels there. On your pre-facelift, you'll want to take off your key receiver, 2 T25s at the top. And this receiver is going to come off, and you just set that aside. Again, on this trim, you'll go around, and there are clips pretty much in the same place all the way around, right? So you'll unclip those, pull that off. Same thing on the R design, you're gonna pull it off. Here's where we're gonna note some differences. And we thought about using this on there just because it has that cool kind of shape to it, but it's not gonna work. There's some modifications. We did like 2 out of 3, and we're gonna stick with our original. So the shape on here, if we look at the back, we have notches, a notch there, a notch here. We do not have those there. The reason those are there is because they are clearing these areas here in which your key receiver is going to mount. Don't have those here. Also, keep in mind, we had 2 buttons, 1, 2 on our pre-facelift. On the post, we just had 1. If we look at the shape here, we will see that there are notches for that. We started notching one out so that we could, you know, retrofit it over here if we wanted. We also already notched out the tops. We just simply cut out with a pair of dikes, and that slides in just perfectly. The problem is, once we got down, it was not sealing all the way. And a reason we think is because, and that's not the biggest deal. That's the thing that held us up. But I mean, easily you could find out what's holding that last part up from seating. You could trim that down and it would work. Here's what I think the thing is, right? If you look at the pre-facelift, we see that it's a parabolic shape. It's almost, you know, quarter, half inch raised on each side. The R design is completely flat across there. So I think that it was kind of meeting up on the edges, but we were meeting on the edges, but we weren't making full contact there. Again, you could probably go the last step and make it work, but we're just going to stick with ours. Okay, next layer is going to be the light filter, right? So you pull that off, you see all your lights, and if you look down in there, there's your LEDs, everything that illuminates. We have another video on going a few layers deeper, swapping all these LEDs, these color filters. So ours is completely blue, which is why we're going blue needles. So that's the filter. It is noted that the pre-facelift, the gauges sit and stand alone from this filter cover. On the R design, they are built in. We have already cut these out, but you can kind of see if we look close that it was one piece. So when we pulled this one up yesterday, the gauges came off with it. And that's when we were doing our cutting to go ahead and get those out. We took some scissors, we went around the edge, and then once we got this, we got an X-Acto knife and just cleaned up those cuts. Essentially, you are just following the outside line, and we can see here the new and the old exactly lining up. We can clean up the edges a little more. There is a difference also on the pre-facelift and post. Turn signals left and right of the message indicator. On the R design, they are under it. So that's one thing to note as well. You can't just simply take this and pop it on because A, you have, you know, 2 buttons over here. You could cut a hole, but when your turn signals blink, you see those LEDs in there, it wouldn't actually illuminate to you because there's no light where those ones are supposed to be. So this, we cut the gauges out and we just put it aside. We're gonna use our original one. Okay, last thing is, once you cut it out, you have the R design gauges, you're good to go. Over here, these gauges simply have a few holes, 1, 2, a notch and a hole, right? And if you look on the illumination filter, you'll see corresponding little nubs where that's gonna line up. On the R design, it does not have those because it was one piece. So what we did is we overlaid our speedometer, let's see which one, here we did. We overlaid and make sure to line up everything. Everything lines up spot on. So your 160, your 80 is gonna be top, and your 0 is gonna notch out there. And so we lined everything up and we just hit it with a black Sharpie, doop, 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 right? And then we pulled it off and we got a drill and we just notched those little guys in right there. So at that point, it will sit right back on those notches and hold it into place. One other thing that we looked at doing is we'll notice the readout on this has a cool little, what looks to be aluminum bezel. It's just painted plastic. Over here on the pre-facelift, we do not have that. And we thought, oh, maybe that's something that we can transfer here onto here. Again, it can be done. If you look at the bottom, you see, oh, 2 retainers, 2 retainers. But if you look at the top one, 1 retainer, 2 retainers. The shape is different. So you could, in fact, get these off and then just shave off the edges and then just put those, boop, right on, and maybe with a dab of super glue in the corners, and it will hold. But again, if you are doing that, you need to know that the R design filter plate is designed to have that extra lip. If we put our pre-facelift and our R design over, we will see that there is that gap that you will have to trace and cut out and account for if you do in fact want to transfer those over. So at this point, you know, we'll clean everything up. We will do our custom glue on our needles. We'll put it back together, and essentially we're just gonna build it right back up the way that we took it apart. It will plug and play. Nothing on this has changed. Again, we may just shave these nubs off and then kind of set that flat on there just to kind of see if we have time. We're still waiting for our needle paint to come in the mail, so we got a little bit of time. And then the last thing, the most important thing to note, is recalibrating your needles. So we've already done this several times since we've done the blue LED conversion in there. And here's the way that I found it to be the easiest. Let's say you're doing your gas gauge, right? I would say go to the gas station and fill up your tank 100% completely full, and you know where that needle lays when you do that. I would also have like another gallon at home or whatever, so when you pull into your driveway, you can top that thing off and then know that you need to calibrate without driving, just sitting in your driveway with the car on, that this needle needs to land there, right? So theoretically, when the car turns off, the needle is there. So you can start by very gently kind of lining the needle up, putting it in place, popping it down. And once you pop it down, you can't move it because the little resistor pin in there is calibrated to be at a certain point when the car's off. So if you say, oh, okay, let me put it on and then line this up with empty, no, you've just unkiltered the pin on there. So when you're putting it on, you need to be very delicate. The car is off and you know, okay, that needle is exactly where it needs to be. And very gently, without moving it, you're going to kind of place it on there, find it, and then push it down. And at that point, you're going to turn the car on and you're going to see where the needle goes. And if you are off, you're going to turn the car off, you're going to pull the needle. I would at that point turn the car on, turn the car off, just to let that resistor pin reset, and then you're going to do that. It may take a few times. And here's one thing we noted when we had done it before too, is that sometimes after a few turns, it would kind of recalibrate itself. So in some situations, we would go back and do a separate needle, maybe, a couple days later. So when we put it all back together, we didn't put the glass face back on. We just kind of drove it and made sure that everything was in place. For the tach, that is, or let's say for the temperature, that's easy. When you get home, run your car. Make sure it's at at your normal operating temperature. Let it run for like 20 minutes, and you're going to do the same thing. As soon as you turn the car off, you know that it's going to reset down at the bottom. Place it, and then wait till it is at dead center or right under center where it typically is on your gauge. Or while the car's on, you can try to, slide it into dead center as well. Turn the car off, turn the car on, run it a day, and make sure that the needle, holds where it's supposed to. The tach is pretty easy. We just pulled up our car tablet and we have our dash command running, and it will show us our idle digitally, and it was like 750 or whatever it was, like that. So same thing, we did that one while the car's on, where, let me grab the other hand here, where we would slide it in and at idle try to get it right before. So we have 200, 400 divided, and you're going to find your 750 right in where it's supposed to be. Same thing, turn it off, turn it on, make sure it stays where it's supposed to. And then speedometer was the toughest one, right? We've seen some people on the forum say, yeah, I set my car at cruise control and I'm doing 60 on the freeway, and then I just set my needle in when I'm doing 60. And, driving with one hand and trying to place a needle as your hand is through the steering wheel at 60 miles per hour is extremely dangerous. So what we did is same thing. We just went off of the 0 with the car off. We turned it on, we turned it off. The needle pin will reset, and we would set it at 0. And then with our dash command, we would drive and we would have the speedometer digitally up on the tablet, and we would look, okay, it says 25 on the tablet. Yes, it says 25 on the speedometer. And we would kind of gauge it that way. So that is one way that we got it done, and it didn't take that much work to do so. So that's kind of everything. We're going to build it back up, and that goes through our design, post facelift into a pre-facelift of 05, 06, 07, depending as well. So hopefully that helps you guys out and gives you some information that you're looking for.